What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Gizmo's Movie Theories and Reviews. So, this video is part 2 of the true origins and identity of aliens in cinema and War of the Worlds stories. So, this is part 2 of my theory as to the true origins and identity of aliens in cinema. So, hope you enjoy, and here we go. So, dive right into it and get ready for part 2. So, hope you enjoy, and here we go. And so, to summarize, my first theory said that the aliens from the War of the Worlds stories were actually angels who stayed too long in the multiple universe and lost their superpowers, and therefore had to create technology to replace their godlike abilities that no longer work. And these angels are here to carry out God's will and judgment against humanity, aka the alien war with humans on Earth, and the aliens' attempts to eradicate humanity on Earth, because they are fulfilling God's will of carrying out God's judgment on Earth against humanity. Or are the aliens from the War of the Worlds stories and all media actually the original race created by God, but he banished them into the void of space because they would not bow and submit to the Lord God and his will? So, which theory do you like more as to the true origins of not only the aliens from the War of the Worlds stories, but all alien human wars from movies, shows, video games, and books? But if you thought that was the end of this alien theory video, well, you'd be wrong. So, what happened to the original creations of God while they waited to initiate Armageddon on humanity? Where did they go? Well, you've heard of the cave paintings and pictures that depict beings coming to Earth from distant star systems, mainly Orion's belt, which leads many people to believe that humanity's gods came from the stars. However, what if the cave paintings and drawings depicting a distant star systems where the gods come from are not a map to take humanity to meet our makers, but instead a warning? A warning telling humanity that a great evil once existed on Earth, just as humans did, and was banished by God to distant stars. And just like in the movie Prometheus with the engineers, these original creations are plotting to return to Earth with devastating weapons of destruction portrayed in the movie Prometheus by the engineers and the black goo and the xenomorphs they evolved from the black goo. But what exactly happened to these original creations of God? Well, perhaps like Illuminati conspiracies on Earth, original creations of God are working in secret with the human elites on Earth to corrupt humanity and prepare us for our own demise, just like the Syndicate was working with the alien colonizers in the X-Files. However, I'm reminded of the Halo books by Greg Bear called Cryptum, Primordial, and Silentium, where it's alluded to, but never fully explained in detail, that the Flood were actually created when the primordial, original inhabitants of the Halo universe lost their war with the Forerunners and turned into dust in order to wait for the time to rise again to enact revenge on the Forerunners for their treasonous war against the primordials. And in the X-Files, Back to the Future, the little manicured man says,
"Living in a cave underground until it mutates and attacks. Your aliens, Agent Mulder, your little green men, arrived here millions of years ago. Those that didn't leave have been lying dormant underground since the last ice age in the form of an evolved pathogen, waiting to be reconstituted by the alien race when it comes to colonize the planet, using us as hosts."
which states that the original inhabitants of Earth, long before a human race existed, once walked the Earth, but over time evolved into a pathogen known as a black oil, as a means to lay dormant until the time is right for the aliens to replace humanity and recolonize the Earth. So, what if the original creation of God, after receiving Adam and Eve and getting banished from the Garden of Eden, spent the next several millennia corrupting humanity, which ultimately ended in a great deluge or great flood on Earth, and original creations that didn't die in the great flood were banished by God to distant star systems to await their judgment for their crimes against God? However, Lord's original creations did not want to wait for their annihilation, so they have been making plans to retake the Earth and replace humanity as the chosen race themselves. However, perhaps these original creations have already been punished by God, and like the serpent in the Garden of Eden was forced to crawl on his belly as punishment for deceiving Adam and Eve, and like how the primordials in Halo evolved into the dust to become the Flood. Also like how in the X-Files the aliens evolved into the black oil to, like the primordials evolving into dust, safely lay dormant until the time comes to strike humanity. This concept could also explain why there is no living engineers on the planets in Prometheus. The engineers didn't die off or weren't defeated by the two xenomorph species, the engineers evolved into a dormant state like the primordials evolving into dust, and the aliens in the X-Files evolving into black oil. And only the engineers kept in stasis survived in their original form, which could be why the engineers that Weyland-Yutani and David awoke in Prometheus seemed surprised by what he found on the planet after he was awoken from hibernation. But what species or race were these original creations by God? Well, if God is human or identifies as human, then you think the Lord would create beings who look like him and the angels. Therefore, it's only logical to think that the Lord would create humans and that this original creation of God would be human. However, aliens depicted in cinema are not human. So how could this be? Well, I'm reminded of a movie scene from The Time Machine, where the library AI says,
"But I believe what was once one race is now two. One above and one below. Two distinct species that have evolved."
And then this is explained in more detail by the Uber Morlock in the same movie, The Time Machine, when he says,
After the moon fell from the sky, the Earth could no longer sustain the species. Some managed to stay above. The rest of us escaped underground.
which ultimately leads to the conclusion that a race that once was human due to environmental and physical changes has evolved past their human state, their human form as we know it, and formed and evolved into a form more suitable for their new environment and life. So perhaps these original creations of God, like the primordials and black oil, evolved past their human form into a new form, which is why aliens in cinema are depicted as non-humans. However, I'm also reminded of another scene in The Time Machine in which Hubert Morlock says,
So we bred ourselves into castes. Some to be our eyes and ears. Some to be our muscles and sinews.
You mean you're hunters?
Yes. Bred to be predators.
which ultimately states that the Morlocks were once humans, but because they could not re-enter their old lives, they genetically engineered themselves into a more superior form and beings that are better suited for handling their tasks. Or, what if, in an attempt to distance themselves from God, the angels and Adam and Eve and Noah and all their descendants, human race in general, the original humans shed their human form and adopted a new form as a way of giving the middle finger to God and Adam and Eve and Noah's race for the Lord's treason and banishing them and replacing them with a new race. Therefore, the original humans created a new identity for themselves that was separate from God and their old human form and his other creations, so who knows. So, in the end, the aliens from the War of the Worlds stories are actually angels who stayed too long in the multiple universe and lost their superpowers, therefore had to create technology to replace their godlike abilities that no longer work. And these angels are here to carry out God's will and judgment against humanity, aka the alien war with humans on Earth, and the aliens' attempts to eradicate humanity on Earth, because they are fulfilling God's will of carrying out God's judgment on Earth against humanity. Or are the aliens from the War of the Worlds stories and all media actually the original race created by God, but he banished them into the void of space because they would not bow and submit to the Lord God and his will, but are waiting until time is right to strike the inferior to them species called humanity, in order for the Lord's original creations to reclaim the rightful place of the chosen race in the universe. And either way, what happened to these aliens, and why are they not intermingling with humanity on Earth? Are they working in secret with human elites for some sinister plan, or did they evolve into some primitive state, either as punishment by God for their treason, like the snake in the Garden of Eden, for not bowing down and serving Lord God, or did these original creations evolve into a dormant, hibernative state to safely wait the moment they will evolve back into the original state, or even more evolved form, perhaps superior state, to enact their revenge on humanity and reclaim the rightful place of the chosen race in the universe? So, what do you think? This is quite a head scratcher. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Later!